Ms. Stacey, how do you read the situation? I mean, there seems to be uh, constant optimism, and yet somehow the two sides have still failed to stitch a deal.
Right, and this is only further complicated, obviously, by President Trump's State of the Union yesterday, in which he pledged to bring forces home from Afghanistan, etc., and really reiterated what Secretary of State Pompeo said. And what we've seen is, at least quietly in Doha, the peace negotiations are back on, and the fact that there's no news from there means that the sides are continuing the discussions, and they're not that far from some breakthroughs. They've made marked progress over many months, and of course, there have been recent attacks and obviously also downing of a U.S. military craft in Afghanistan. Small, complicating issues, but the end could be in sight, despite how fragile these talks always are.
Okay, let me take you back to September last year when there was optimism and a deal was on the table and it waited signatures. That is when an attack happened in which one US serviceman was killed, and President Trump immediately came online and said, well, the talks are dead. They're dead. There was a certain reiteration of that. Now, with hindsight, do you think that was a missed opportunity? Obviously, the talks resumed, and we're still far from a deal, despite Ambassador Khalilzad and the Taliban being in a clutch for so many days and so many hours.
We all are talking in terms of being so near or so far. It's somewhere in between. They have made considerable progress, even though we know that things like the departure date of U.S. troops and whether and when the intra-Afghan talks will begin to take place, those issues are still on the table, and that's where they have some divisions. But Pakistan has been playing a constructive role. So has China. Iran, that probably is a little more complicated since the killing of Qasem Soleimani. But there are other stakeholders who have been constructively supportive of the progress to this point. And what it will really take is probably an ongoing commitment, for example, of the Taliban to continue to bring violence to a lower and more stable point. There's been progress on that, but that has also slipped recently, and hence the comments from U.S. officials.